The bodies of the Gilgo Beach Four were not the only remains found along a stretch of beach off Ocean Parkway beginning in 2010. 6 other sets of remains were uncovered by investigators. And now the big question is, will Rex Heuermann be charged in those killings? Police are investigating, but there are a lot of people who believe that this quiet beach community actually has a second serial killer on its hands. In this school of thought, there is not one Long Island serial killer, but 2, the Gilgo Beach Killer and the MANORVILLE Butcher. What are the chances, though, that there were 2 serial killers active around the same time in the same area who used the same dumping ground? It sounds almost impossible, but the victims, they fall into 2 different groups with some stark differences, particularly when it comes to how they were disposed. Rex Heuermann is the suspected Long Island serial killer who was arrested in mid-July for the murders of Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. On July 25th, investigators were seen digging in the backyard of Heuermann's home before wrapping up the search of the property. Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney confirmed that no human remains were found at the home, but that investigators did obtain a massive amount of material that still needs to be cataloged and tested. And the forensics team was, quote, looking for tangible items of evidence as well as trace evidence, including blood and DNA and hair fibers that may be connected to the 3 murdered women found along Gilgo Beach. Their corpses, along with one other, the body of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, were discovered almost accidentally in December 2010 when an off-duty detective was doing a training exercise out in the brambles along Ocean Parkway with his police dog Blue. He was actually searching for a different missing girl. Bartholomew's remains were first discovered, and within 2 days, police discovered 3 more women. All 4 victims were sex workers who had previously been reported missing. They were roughly the same age and body type and were all disposed of similarly. The bodies were found within a quarter mile of each other and bound with either leather belts or duct tape around the feet, midsection, and head. And then they were wrapped in camouflage burlap. Heuermann has been charged in 3 of the murders and is the prime suspect in the 4th, according to law enforcement. At the time of the grisly discoveries, police knew they had a serial killer on their hands, and they kept searching the area looking for more victims. And they found a lot. In March of 2010, nearly 3 months after the discovery of the Gilgo Beach Four, investigators were continuing to scour that same area, and lo and behold, they found more human remains. Unlike the Gilgo Four, these remains were not intact, and the partial skeleton was identified as a missing 20-year-old sex worker named Jessica Taylor. Now, the victim being a young sex worker certainly fits the criteria of the first 4, but the rest is completely different because Jessica Taylor had been dismembered. Investigators found a piece of one arm, her hands, and skull. That is it. But once they identified her, law enforcement would learn that these body parts were from the same person as a torso they had previously discovered in 2003 in Manorville. That's a different area of Long Island. The remains of 3 more people were then found a few days after Taylor along Ocean Parkway. One was another missing sex worker, 24-year-old Valerie Mack. She was also dismembered. Just her right foot, hands, and head were there. And like Taylor, her torso had previously been identified back in 2000 in Manorville, right around where near Jessica's torso was also found. Again, her being a young sex worker led investigators to believe this could have been the work of the same person. But the next 2 bodies that were uncovered don't really fit the pattern of any of those initial victims. One was an Asian male, somewhere in his late teens or early 20s. All of the other victims so far have, of course, been female. This victim is believed to have possibly been a trans person because they were found in women's clothing, but the person was biologically male. Their identity still has not been confirmed, so we cannot be sure. But after Heuermann was arrested, this particular victim stands out. But let me briefly put a pin in that for right now. I'll return to that in a bit. Getting back to the bodies found near Gilgo Beach, the remains of a toddler, a little girl, were also discovered, and she doesn't fit the pattern either. The dismembered body parts, however, of a Jane Doe was later found. Now, she is believed to be the toddler's mother. That Jane Doe is known as Peaches, and Peaches' torso had also already been uncovered in another area of Long Island in 1997. And along with Peaches, part of yet another female victim were also discovered. Once again, they were linked to other remains found in Long Island in another area in 1996. I know this is a lot to keep track of, so to lay it out crystal clear, you have the Gilgo Beach Four bound in burlap, then 4 other women who were just body parts, their torsos previously discovered by law enforcement years prior. And finally, you have these outliers, the Asian male and the toddler, who don't really fit into either pattern. Now, in the years I have followed this case, I've always kind of thought of the Gilgo Beach 4 and the other 4 victims as 2 separate cases. In my mind, I just didn't see the same person doing both. Now, police said that the Gilgo Beach bodies were wrapped in the type of burlap that is commonly used to camouflage someone when they go duck hunting. That sounds like the killer, whoever they are, took steps to conceal the bodies from view, probably hoping they would just blend in with the surrounding terrain and not be found. On the flip side, the torsos that were scattered in Manorville weren't particularly well hidden. A woman walking her dog just stumbled upon Jessica Taylor's torso in the woods. Back in 2011, the Suffolk County District Attorney told reporters that the manner of disposal of the dismembered victims was, quote, distinctly dissimilar to the 4 originally identified Gilgo victims. In addition to the torsos of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor, which were found near one another in Manorville back in 2003 and 2000, 2 other torsos belonging to male victims were also found in that same Long Island neighborhood around the same time. So at this point, this killer, the torso killer, had been dubbed the Manorville Butcher. This was a decade before the Gilgo Beach victims would ever be discovered. So to be very clear here, neither the toddler nor the young Asian male were dismembered. Neither were they bound and wrapped in burlap. But whether you're in the camp that believes Lisk is one person or that there are 2 killers, it has been speculated that the male victim was likely to have been killed by the same person who killed the Gilgo 4, which is allegedly Rex Heuermann. The proximity of the male remains were the closest to the original Gilgo Beach victims. Now, the victim was not bound in burlap, and police said that the cause of death was violent, but people have a theory as to why that was. It's believed by some that the killer picked up this person for sex work, believing them to be female, but upon discovering that they were not, got enraged, killed, and dumped them. Serial killers tend to be methodical, and the idea here is that the killer's plan, their ritual, if you will, was thrown off by the victim not being who they said they were. Therefore, they were killed in a different manner and not bound like the first 4. After Rex Heuermann was arrested, there was something in police documents that seemed to bolster this theory. In the list of depraved and disturbing online search terms that cops claim Heuermann looked up, one of those was, quote, Asian twink tie-up porn. Twink is a slang term for a gay or bisexual male in their late teens or early 20s who has a smaller build and is considered very young looking. The rest of Heuermann's search terms were about females and young girls and mostly violent pornography, so that search term kind of stands out. But it is a bit of a jump to get from an explicit search term to murder. But in an investigation of this magnitude, the smallest leads are worth following. And investigators are doing just that. They are looking at whether Heuermann is in any way connected to the other victims found in that area, but so far he has only been charged with 3 killings. If we are going to use Heuermann's search terms as a clue, I think it's important to point out that investigators said that he compulsively viewed photos of the Gilgo Beach 4 victims and searched their names and the names of their immediate family members hundreds of times. He seemed obsessed with the case of the Long Island serial killer, but police don't list any searches for those additional victims, nor do they have anything on the Manorville Butcher. Now, that's not to say that Heuermann never looked those things up, but nothing to that effect was included in police documents. Something Heuermann did search that kind of pinged my spidey senses was the name John Bittroff. Bittroff is a convicted killer and has long been suspected of being the Long Island serial killer. He was convicted in 2017 of murdering 2 sex workers in the early 90s and is the prime suspect in a 3rd, but police have said he may be responsible for many, many more. 2 notable things about John Bittroff. One of his victims, Rita Tangretti, was friends with one of the Gilgo Beach 4, Melissa Bartholomew. At his sentencing, the prosecutor said that they were still investigating Bittroff's possible connection to the Gilgo Beach victims. Of course, we know now that Rex Heuermann is suspected of killing Bartholomew and allegedly left DNA evidence on her body. The other thing to know about John Bittroff, he lived in Manorville, roughly 3 miles from where the torsos of Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack were found. But as it stands now, it's unclear if the Gilgo Beach killer and the Manorville Butcher are one and the same, but law enforcement continues to investigate. In the meantime, the investigation into the Long Island serial killer has expanded to 4 states. Police in New Jersey, Nevada, and South Carolina are now re-examining cold cases to see if any of their unsolved murders are connected in any way to Rex Heuermann. For more true crime content like this, hit like and subscribe.